Shimmering Skies has finally been out for a few weeks now, and we actually have some tournament results that we can discuss. Normally on our channel, we kind of have like this little bit of a rule that we set for ourselves of 30 or more players. But right now, it's such an early distribution with people still kind of like focused on Toronto and that metagame. We're going to break our rules a little bit and we're going to say 25 players minimum for the tournaments that we're going to be discussing. So, in this, we have 6 different tournaments that we're kind of breaking down, showing you the meta report for those tournaments and showing some of the more successful decks in them as we go through everything. So, if you're looking for something like results, we got it for you. Let's start right now, right away with the meta breakdown. The meta breakdown for Shimmering Skies week 1. Realistically, it's like week 3, but we'll just play it by ear, guys. Not a big deal. So we have Amber Steel leading the way with 9, Ruby Sapphire at 7, and then there's a bit of a drop off with everything else. Ruby Amethyst at 4, Sapphire Amethyst at 4, Amber Emerald at 3, Sapphire Steel at 2, Emerald Sapphire at 2, Amethyst Steel at 2, Amber Ruby at 1, and Emerald Amethyst at 1. Now, very early on, it doesn't look like that big of a difference in type of a metagame. But what I find really interesting is that there are decks here that we have just not seen be successful, honestly, ever. A deck like Sapphire Emerald being on this list in any number is kind of crazy. The idea that 2 of them were in top 8 out of the 6 tournaments being reported is unprecedented. It really is kind of showcasing that Shimmering Skies is delivering a very new metagame if all of a sudden an ink combination can be successful in that. I'm really excited to talk about that deck actually. But overall, you look at this and we have a fairly large set of data here. It's early on. There's still a lot to be seen. There's a lot to learn and develop as we get closer and closer to the first Disney Lorcana challenges in Birmingham and in Vegas as we really start approaching this data. And I'm sure we're going to get even more data going along the way. But for now, this is a really great starting point to get an idea of what the metagame, at least in like a global aspect of these medium-sized tournaments here than what we're used to. Obviously, at DLCs, we're talking about thousands of players, but in some of these local tournaments, getting 25 to 47 players, I think was the highest number on the list, is really great. Kind of a way to start out piecing together information, see what people are doing, see how people are answering the daisy problem that we're going to discuss in a little bit, and all those things like that. So, how about we just start breaking down these decks? We're going to be breaking down almost one deck from every ink combination on this list. There's only missing Amethyst Steel because it was kind of on the lower end of the top 8 in both of the smaller tournaments I used to report it. So we left that one out. Maybe it'll come back for next one. Who knows, guys? But all in all, let's get the ball rolling with some new decks from Shimmering Skies. Amber Emerald took first place in a 42-player tournament. And this is probably one of the more interesting deck lists moving forward. This deck has a good chance to be represented pretty well in the 4.5 metagame, but with the addition of Shimmering Skies, we do gain a few new tools that make the deck very interesting. The notable cards being added from Shimmering Skies are Rapunzel's Tower, which is the 2-cost inkable location with 8 willpower, which is absolutely staggering willpower for a cost. 1 to move to, and then while characters are at this location, they gain 3 willpower. So it really kind of makes all of your characters pretty fatty, which is definitely useful in a grab your swords metagame potentially. And of course, just protecting all your characters in general from trades and things like that, just to give them a little more sturdiness. Prince Naveen is the other addition here. In this deck, specifically, when he comes into play, you could automatically play a card like We Don't Talk About Bruno, or, of course, the other new addition here, which is You're Welcome. So the ability to play a 4-cost character that is a 3/3, that is a Singer 6, and he has 2 lore. The moment he enters play on turn 4, you can just You're Welcome in a way, or We Don't Talk About Bruno, any of the problematic characters very quickly in the game. It also, as a follow-up with the Singer 6, is pretty phenomenal, giving you virtually any card in your deck after that point the ability to sing Under the Sea with just Prince Naveen. Some of the other notables in this deck are the choices to play 3 Cricky, play 4 You Have Forgotten Me's, We're still on the Prince John lines, which is nice. Kita is another wonderful character for this deck, but you can kind of start to see now that there's a lot of choices being made as we're really tinkering with numbers to fit some of these newer cards in. The deck at the end of the day is, of course, a Diablo deck. Having four bare necessities with Diablo, having Rapunzel's Tower and Hidden Cove are all ways to protect your Diablo pretty well and really keep it healthy and keep it in a position that's going to always draw you more cards. Prince John is obviously another player in this deck. Having Ward being a 1/2 that whenever your opponent discards a card, you draw cards. Having Ursula 2, Bare Necessity, Sudden Chill, You Have Forgotten Me, and We Don't Talk About Bruno are all ways to consistently keep our hand healthy along with removing our opponent's options from the game. All in all, I do expect Emerald to be a player in the new metagame in a big way, and this is a nice way to look at it if you're trying to start and get a concept idea of what this deck really is capable of. Amber Steel finished in second place at a 42-player event, and our only new card added to this deck is, of course, Daisy Duck Donald's Date. The one cost, uninkable, one strength, four willpower, and two lore is going to be an absolute menace to the Shimmering Skies metagame. The ability of Big Prize, whenever this character quests, each opponent reveals the top card of their deck. If it's a character card, they may put it in their hand. Otherwise, they put it on the bottom of their deck. Amber Steel was a deck that I talked about a few weeks ago, and I really discussed the idea that Daisy Duck doesn't care about giving your opponents characters in a world where we're just going to sing a whole new world. So because of that, giving your opponent extra cards really doesn't mean anything to you as long as they can't utilize them quick enough. The idea that you can just gain 2 to 4 to 6 lore, give them 3 cards, and then wheel them away really just takes away the entire downside of Big Prize. Aside from that, there are no new Shimmering Skies cards. We've seen some options where playing Pete Referee or Prince Naveen are a couple of those options. There are definitely more that could be discussed, and I do assume we'll see more and more of them moving forward as people acquire them. This looked like a release celebration tournament also. So this might have been opening weekend, and it was just, hey, I was able to get my 4 daisies. I wasn't trying to get Prince Naveens or anything like that. I was just trying to make sure I had Daisy Duck in my deck, and I can totally respect that in an opening weekend tournament. So I do definitely think that that is potentially the case for this deck, and it will evolve more and more as the weeks go on. The one notable card I think that you see here that isn't super popular is Aerial Sonic Warrior. This is a card that got a little bit of love early on in Ursula's return, but really hasn't been a successful card within the metagame. So it'll be interesting if somehow this card makes an impact and really, I don't know, has the ability. It's a very strong card. It has a good stat line. If there are less Medusas in the world, the card definitely looks a lot better. If we're comfortable shifting on 4 into it to put the 3/8 body in play, it definitely is way more sturdy than Aerial Singer. So there's potentially a lot going on for it that, it might have finally a little bit of time in the sun, but it's really difficult to say and be sure of. Aside from that, this is a pretty straightforward, aggressive Amber Steel deck. If you look at this, I think it's very much leveraging the play draw options. Only having 2 Piglet is just noting that on the draw, that card might not be as good enough, whereas Ursula is very good on the draw. So leveraging Mr. Smee and Piglets is the option of choice most of the time on the play, and leveraging Ursula Vanessa on the draw is a big deal, I think, in this deck. Having Benja might be an interesting call. Also, not crazy sure how good item decks are going to be, but having the 3 lore or 2 lore character on the 3 cost inkable, that's a 2/3, is still fine and safe. At the end of the day, he's inkable. You can get rid of him whenever. The song packages, not much change or anything like that going on, but notable that we have 2 World's Greatest Criminal Mind in this deck and 4, and then Along Came Zeus. Definitely not common for the current metagame to see 4 Zeus in any deck, so that's also quite notable. Aside from that, congratulations again here to Pavel, 42-player opening weekend tournament. Daisy ducking our way to a bunch of wins, I'm sure. Sapphire Ruby took a first place finish in the 32-player Mulligan Challenge tournament. This deck has a lot of new Shimmering Skies toys, which is very notable here. We have, of course, the Chicha Dedicated Mother, Hideaway, Vision of the Future, Donald Duck, Focused Flatfoot are all of the new cards in addition to this deck. And there are some notable returns, such as Sisu Daring Visitor, who is the, of course, #1 Daisy Duck killer potentially for this particular playstyle of a deck. Vision of the Future is the one card that really sticks out to me because it's a card that I haven't seen too many people talk about just yet. It's a 2-cost inkable action that reads, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, put 1 into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So effectively it is a large develop your brain for 1 more ink, but it really can play a key and crucial part of finding a card that you really need, and for honestly a pretty cheap cost. This deck is very much looking to ramp incredibly well, having 1 Jump Ahead, Fishbone Quill, and the new Donald Duck, all as 4-ofs in this list. So getting your Inkwell up to a heavy point is not very difficult. So paying 2 on an off turn to kind of like just look at the top 5 cards of your deck to find that Sisu, find that Maleficent, even find the Popsicle or the Lucky Dime. Of course, we're always looking for Be Prepareds and things like that as well from time to time, or even our high rim to just keep the draw engine going. I think the card's very interesting when you compare it to even a card like Dig Through Time that we have seen pop up every now and then in a couple of the Disney Lorcana Challenge top 16 and top 8 deck lists. For just 2 on an inkable, you get to look at 5 cards and get 1. I think it's a pretty easy choice to play this card in a deck like this that really kind of wants to be a little more tutorish. In all honesty, I'm shocked that this list isn't even more tutorish, playing less of certain cards just because of the fact that you have the ability to play a 2-cost inkable that has the ability to look at 5 cards off the top of your deck. Also notable here that this is a standard version of this deck. It is not the super heavy item version that we have seen, no queens or anything like that, and it's very much utilizing Dedicated Mother as an additional draw source. I still am slightly worried about the level of this card and the playability of it. We are seeing Tipo instead over this card in some decks, which I think you're going to see in some of the other Sapphire decks that we feature in this video. But Chica, if she can sit and play and she can draw you multiple cards, I think she's worth it. If we could ever make support useful at all, great. I don't know that we're going to in general, but I do wonder if this 2-cost on Inkable is going to just really be the first sacrifice of this deck. It's hard to say this early. I'm all for people testing it right now and trying to see if they like it. I just think for me, being the 2-cost uninkable that she is and having cards that can fill her role a lot easier and honestly a lot less vulnerable, I think is where I want to be. So I could really see this card being one of the first cuts out of the Ruby Sapphire decks in general, or just the Sapphire ramp decks in general. Sapphire Steel picked up a 26-player tournament with a first place finish. The new cards from this list, again, are Hideaway. This is a list that is featuring Tipo. Vision of the Future also makes another appearance. Pete Referee, and, of course, Arthur King Victorious. Arthur King Victorious is a 7-cost, uninkable, 3 strength, 6 willpower, and 3 lore character with Shift 5 and the ability Knighted by the King. When you play this character, chosen character gains Challenger +2 and Resist +2 and can challenge ready characters this turn. This is a card that actually is a side bet going on in the Forbidden Mountain Discord between Scott and I, where I am of the belief that this card is not going to be good enough, and I don't think it'll be overall successful. Scott thinks it has a shot. So if you want to be a part of that prop bet, feel free to hit me up in the comments and let me know how you feel about King Arthur here. I think if it's going to have a chance at success, a deck like this does make a lot of sense. The ability to Fishbone Quill it away when it's not good is great. Its ability in general to, when you play it, can be hyper effective when necessary. But the 7-cost uninkable stat line is very worrisome to me. And aside from that, I'm just not crazy about the card in general. But hey, if it's worth it to play this card and get this stat line and get a 3 lore character, then maybe he has a shot, but I'm not super convinced. All in all, aside from that, this list is pretty straightforward. Utilizing the Pete referee, I think, is the more interesting one here. But really, what it does is, I believe later in the game, it'll help you set up better a whole new world turns. Anytime where you can kind of ramp up early, get some stuff on the field, and then just finish the game, with like a quick Tinkerbell into a Pete referee for only 9 ink, which is not really that difficult at all to acquire, can kind of keep your guys protected from any of the be prepared turns or any of like the action removal. That way you have like one more layer of just being safe. And then you can sing a whole new world and kind of just start all over again and really punish your opponent. Notable that this list does not have any of the Tamatoas. So we're not trying to win through item base lucky dimes here. We're just kind of nickeling and diming our opponent with 2 and 3 lore gains. Of course, we still have the bell, which is nice. It's still a 5 lore gainer, but all in all, this list is very different and kind of more well-rounded and spaced out, utilizing Captain Hooks and Smees, and even this little Tippo here that we can discuss for one moment. So Tippo is basically the reverse Chicha, where he is a 2-cost inkable, 1 strength, 2 willpower, 1 lore character. And then when he comes into play, you have a one-time Fishbone Quill effect where you can put a card from your hand into your Inkwell face down and exert it. I do think this is very great. I think this card has a lot more play and versatility than the Chicha. Having the 2 willpower is relevant, but also being inkable is the most relevant, I think, of all. Chenpo, I think, is going to become a nuisance more and more in the current metagame, so I can definitely see that card seeing more play. Fire the Cannons, I think, is also the big one. We're looking at a way that if we can Captain Hook on 1 and Captain Hook can live, Captain Hook will be able to effectively trade with Daisy Ducks on turn 2, only allowing your opponent to get 2 lore with the character because of a card like Fire the Cannons, which is great. We do have to come into sacrifice and only playing 3 Fortispheres, though, so we don't have the 8 Popsicles in this list. All in all, I do think this list is pretty well rounded. To me, it looks like we were trying a lot of different things, which is great early on in a metagame. It's like the perfect opportunity to really go and try new cards out more than ever. So shout out again here to Pete's Vision, picking up a first place win in a 26-player tournament. Hey guys, if you haven't yet and you want to join our community, you can see in the pinned comment below or in the description of this video is a link to our Discord. We're a growing community. We're actually at about 1,000 members now and still growing. And just recently we started Sunday night webcam nights. There's also potential for Sunday night TTS nights, kind of whichever way that you might want to find yourself able to play the game with our community and kind of grow together and really make these Disney Lorcana challenges even more fun. You might be playing with players from all around the world that you never think you're going to meet. But now with DLCs and having these reasons to travel and meet players, I think it's really cool to kind of establish relationships within these communities. So then when we get together at DLCs, it makes them all the more meaningful, meeting people, meeting friends, and really just creating an even everlasting moment in Disney Lorcana. So if you haven't yet, definitely check the pin comment and join our Discord. Thank you so much. Let's get to the rest of the decks in this video. Sapphire Amethyst makes an appearance at a second place finish in a 28-player event at our friends hosting the Cerberus Den. The noteworthy cards added from Shimmering Skies are Cogsworth, the Illuminary Watchman, Tippo, Growing Sun, the Library, Elsa the Fifth Spirit, Cusco, Selfish Emperor, and Anna, Mystical Majesty. This is probably the most new cards in a deck, in any deck on this list, which is what I was really excited to talk about. There are definitely cards in here that have not gotten a lot of kind of clout either. Cogsworth is the first that comes to mind. This character that is just a simple 1 cost, 1 strength, 1 willpower, 1 lore, and his ability of when he comes into play, he gives something rush. Very notable, very interesting. Definitely makes cards like Crab pretty interesting because Crab can now on turn 4 target itself and then give itself plus Challenger 3 and all of a sudden be a 4 strength, 3 willpower rush character on turn 4, which is notable. But it can also, really play well with other cards in this deck. The combo of Cogsworth plus the Library is also very notable. This world where we can play characters, move them to the library, run them in, banish them, banish opponent characters, and then replace themselves is really notable as well. Rafiki makes a very interesting return to the metagame. I think, again, this is just a Daisy Duck issue. Having a 3-strength character when needed is great, but it's also notable that if they want to take a turn off and just swing back into your Rafiki will not actually naturally trade into Daisy Duck. So you're still going to need a solid follow up for them to not be able to just instantly swing back and remove your Rafiki without getting any value out of it. So there's a lot to be noted there. This deck is all around interesting. It's playing a lot of really powerful cards. I think that this is truly embodying a lot of what Shimmering Skies has to offer, bringing Sapphire Amethyst as a potential contender in the metagame, where it just hasn't had that true ability yet in any previous metagame. There's been a little bit of success in smaller events and things like that, but realistically, the deck was never able to be successful at any of the Disney Lorcana challenges or any of the large events in general. But hey, Elsa the Fifth Spirit is a great card. Being paired with Elsa Spirit of Winter and having her make a return is wonderful. Cusco is exactly what this card was looking for in so many different ways. Still being able to win games through a Queen's Castle, and now the addition of Library to give this deck even more draw. If this deck was already doing something good, it was drawing cards. Now it's able to draw even more cards. Not relying on a card like Fishbone Quill is also important. So adding Tippo to this deck is quite interesting because we can utilize Tippo, put a card down our Inkwell, and the next turn we can actually Fox it or Snake it. The weird cool play, I think, is on 2, you can Tippo, put a card in the resource for it face down. And on 3, you can actually snake your Tippo back and then replay it again. And all of a sudden, you can be on like 6 ink on turn 4, these 2 characters in play, and really start just developing your game even further. Anna Mystical Majesty is a card that really hasn't gotten a ton of love. I think it's exclusively because her shift targets are very minimal, and we can see we're not even playing them in this deck. But her ability is very notable. When she comes into play, she exerts all opposing characters. So it can really set up this line where you can just kind of lock down your opponent, take all the characters away from them, and it also helps you get around problematic ward characters and things like that. So I do believe she's going to have a place. I'll be curious to see how successful that card is moving forward. It's very hard to say or be specific about it, but I do love, again, like players really testing out cards, giving as many Shimmering Skies cards a chance early on, and seeing, how this is going to really play out over the course of the metagame as we get closer and closer to the Disney Lorcana challenges featuring Shimmering Skies. Amber Ruby picked up a first place victory at a 47-player tournament. The Shimmering Skies additions to this deck are, of course, Daisy Duck Donald State, and then 2 more interesting choices: Maximus Team Champion and Gaston Pure Paragon. So Gaston Pure Paragon is a 9-cost uninkable character with 2 lore, 10 strength, and 6 willpower, with the ability A Man Among Men. For each damaged character you have in play, you pay 2 less to play this character. And it also has the ability of Rush. Now, why would I play a character like that? Well, let's talk about Maximus. Maximus Team Champion is a 6-cost inkable character with 3 strength, 5 willpower, and 2 lore, and the ability Royally Big Rewards. At the end of your turn, if you have any character in play with 5 strength or more, gain 2 lore. If you have any in play with 10 strength or more, gain 5 lore instead. So obviously Gaston is the perfect combination card for this Maximus to gain the maximum amount of lore. But what I love about this deck is a card like Flynn Rider paired with a card like Maximus really offers Ruby a ton of way to gain lore without even the need to turning characters sideways. Flynn Rider being protected by Sisu on turn 3 is great, and a card like Maximus can follow up any of your really strong cards, such as Maui, Hydra, or, of course, Gaston and Chernobog. So this deck is really looking to control the board a ton with its Ruby characters, draw with its Amber characters, or replace themselves with cards like Mufasa and, of course, Stitch, Carefree Surfer, and really just gain effective lore through Daisy Duck, through Flynn Rider, through Maximus, and then, of course, just our gigantic dudes in general. Gaston, Chernobog, Sisu as well. being a 3 lore character with the shift options, still having cards like Hydra and Lady Tremaine and Madame Medusa along with Maui is really just saying, hey, I'm going to probably try and take the best of both worlds here. I'm going to draw a bunch of cards. I'm going to have all of the red ruby removal that we really want. And I'm also now adding this factor of Flynn Rider and Maximus to really compound gaining lore and doing it without even having a quest, which means you can set up turns where you can play a Flynn Rider while you have a strength advantage in play, gain lore, and then play a Flynn Rider to finish off the game. The same can be said about Maximus. Ever putting a Gaston into play and it surviving a turn, you have to be very weary that all of a sudden with just one Maximus, your opponent can gain 7 lore in a turn. That's a really threatening line for a 2-card combo. All in all, not shocked to see this deck pick up a solid win early on in the metagame, as most decks are really trying to figure out what they're doing and how to control the game, etc. This deck very much is trying to play solitaire for the most part, even while interacting with your opponent's cards by just kind of utilizing all of your 1-for-1 trades and 2-for-1 trades to pick up a lot of really favorable trades for you in general. Ruby Amethyst simply won't go away, and it finished second place in a 47-player tournament this past weekend. And the notable Shimmering Skies additions are, yeah, you can keep looking for them because there are 0. This honestly does not shock me in the least bit. I actually very much expect Ruby Amethyst to remain a very budget-friendly deck in a world that you don't actually need any new cards to make it playable. This is very much designed with the new metagame in mind, however. Going back to Minnie Mouses and Olafs are very notable. Plain Teeth and Ambitions is another notable change. And going back to Merlin Craps. This is kind of effectively utilizing your 1-3 stat lines all over the place. I will say the one card that might confuse me just a little bit is Flynn Rider. I don't know how successful Flynn Rider will be in a new metagame, but it's early on, so hey, may as well still try and pick up those wins. With, of course, the Flynn Rider in this particular type of deck, but I do expect that card to be removed, and we're likely going to make a return of Cusco. Just having another effective way to utilize Crab would be my best guess. But this is a deck that we have seen over and over again. It looks like a deck that I like. Probably, if we remove Flynn Rider and Sisu, it's very close to the decks that we had seen be successful in Atlanta and things like that. So there's not too much to add here aside from this is exactly what I expect Ruby Amethyst to do. I don't think there's too many new shocking surprises for it in Shimmering Skies, but I do still think it'll have a true place in the metagame with all of the utility that this deck really has to offer. Sapphire Emerald picked up a top 8 finish in a 47-player tournament, and it has a lot of new Shimmering Skies additions. Tipo, Growing Sun, You're Welcome, Mother Gothel, Unwavering Schemer, Clarabelle, Light on Her Hooves. This deck probably single-handedly broke Clarabelle in one day. Clarabelle, Light on Her Hooves is a 7-cost inkable character, 5 strength, 6 willpower, 2 lore, with the ability of Shift 5 and Keep in Step. At the end of your turn, if chosen opponent has more cards in their hand than you may draw cards until you have the same number. This card went from a $10 card to a $40 card virtually overnight, with the reports of this deck being successful in multiple tournaments. This ability on this card is very noticeable because we are utilizing 4 You Welcomes, we're utilizing Mother's Knows Best, we're even utilizing Lady Tremaine to get back our actions to continuously do this. So we are maintaining board position through the ability of Emerald Bounce cards or Emerald Advantage cards that basically are enabling your opponent to draw cards off of the characters that you're playing or the cards that you're playing, but you're getting no punishment for it because of a card like Clarabelle that just matches those cards. If you're welcome a character and you're moving from play and your opponent draws cards, but at the end of the turn you get to draw them too, it's pretty break even. It's actually better for you because you still have a 5/6 character in play with 2 lore. I think this is one of the more interesting decks in the Shimmering Skies early metagame. I did say
that I thought it was going to be one of the more difficult decks to be successful and to be figured out. So I don't expect it to come out swinging and winning many tournaments early, as we're still like developing the best ways to play this deck. But I love to see it early. I love seeing Ice Block and Under the Sea. I think that is so cool. Definitely something we were trying out early on in Ursa's Return. It just didn't work. But now we might finally have the pieces to kind of just bring it all together. Super excited to see how this deck can really play out.
In the end, you are still a Sapphire ramp deck at its core, utilizing Hiram
as your draw potential with Popsicles, and then utilizing Lucky Dime to win the game. Still Tamatoa, still Bell Tradesman Special. All of these things are still kind of very core to Sapphire are being utilized here, but you get this very interesting Emerald removal package with your welcome, Mother's Knows Best. We don't talk about Bruno, Under the Sea, and of course the Muses. I really do think that this deck is cool and interesting, and a huge shout out here to Michael for picking up a top 8 in a 47-player tournament. Emerald Amethyst finished in the top 8 of a 47-player tournament as well. And in this deck, we definitely picked up a couple new cards again for
kind of a deck that has fallen off in the Ursa's Return metagame. Our Shimmering Skies editions are Bonsai, Gluttonous, Predator, the Library, Madam Mim, Elephant, Elsa the Fifth Spirit, Mother Gothel, Unwavering Schemer. So these are the brand new cards that are being, but what I love about this deck is the notable return of Lyle Tiberius Rourke. This is a character that I think people were really excited for early, and they just didn't pan out. We just didn't get there, but now we might have more ways to kind of utilize this character to its fullest.
He's a 3-cost, uninkable, 2-strength, 4 willpower, 1 lore character with 2 abilities. The first, well, now you know. When you play this character, chosen opposing character gains Reckless during their next turn. The second ability, thanks for volunteering. Whenever one of your other characters is banished, each opponent loses 1 lore. This is definitely a way to attempt to turn the tides for early lore gains from Daisy Duck. Every single time that you can utilize that ability, you take away half of what Daisy Duck was doing. Meanwhile, you are effectively a 52 character deck that's basically saying like, yeah, go ahead, Minnie, let me draw a few cards. I'm totally fine with that. The interesting thing to note here for me is the 1-drop selection of Turtlebox Baller and Cursed Merfolk are very much saying like, hey, I'm going to be the aggressor in the format, and that's going to be great, but really being very weak to Daisy Ducks. The moment your opponent decides to start challenging into Cursed Merfolks and Cursed Followers, you might be a little bit of trouble because your cards are kind of losing out and you don't have a great recovery system for them. Bonsai is another new addition here. The 2-cost 3/2 for 2 lore that is uninkable, is a vanilla as well. But hey, it's another really nice addition for the stat line that could be quite relevant. I'm not sure if that one will pan out or if we'll keep that or if we'll kind of switch back to like a Flynn Rider and be more traditional. It's really hard to say at this moment. But I do think it's really cool that people are kind of committing to that card and trying to utilize it. Of course, we're still an Ursula Deceiver deck. That card's too good to pass up. Everything else that Amethyst has loved doing is all here for us to utilize. Madam Mim Elephant is a card that really hasn't been talked about too much. It hasn't really picked up a lot of steam, I think, from a lot of different players. But it's definitely a card that at the end of the day, when you look at it, you're like, man, that thing is an elephant. It is gigantic. The stat line
of being a 3-strength, 7 willpower character with 1 lore, for a 4-cost inkable. And then the ability to pick up your cards is great. And then obviously the secondary ability of moving 2 damage to opposing characters at the beginning of your turn is nothing to look away from. It's very good. It's very powerful. So I really like this deck. I like the concept of it. I love the idea of reutilizing a card like Lyle with the bounce package.
Adding Gigantic Mim is a nice way to close out games. The Elsa here is a great way to utilize your characters to pick off things. Very often in times, Fox gets left around in this deck, Snake gets left around in this deck. utilizing Elsa to exert things, to pick things off, utilizing Lyle for the reckless and making them force themselves to turn sideways. I think you were just playing a really interesting game and really like messing up your opponent's playstyle. So I'm very interested to see if Emerald Amethyst can be successful in the new metagame. I'd love to know if anything on this list has shocked you. Again, 6 different tournaments ranging from 25 to 50 players, 47 I think was the max in this particular event, but there was a lot of really cool decks out there. All of the decks and descriptions of the tournaments are in the description below. So if you're looking for any of these decks or any of those tournaments to kind of look at like the overall meta breakdown that I presented at the beginning of the tournament, they're all in the description below. So I am curious, like, is there anything on here that shocked you? Is the lack of something as an idea here? 6 tournaments, 25 players or more, no Amber Amethyst decks, nothing for aggro at all from that side. We did see some aggro decks here that were successful, but not that one, which is a deck that a lot of people were hyping up quite a bit. So, is it the Ruby Sapphire of this set where we hype all these things up and they just never come out? I don't know. Will there be, more aggro decks with Daisy? At the end of the day, there was only 2 of them, I think, on this list that I would consider an aggro deck. Is there more for Daisy to do? I think so. Let's be honest, guys. But all in all, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this meta report, I do these basically weekly because that's how we got to do things. In the next couple of weeks, we have DLC side events. There are 8-round tournaments. Unfortunately, the deck list won't be out for there, but I will be in Toronto checking out the top tables, trying to talk to players in those events, see what's going on so I can report on them healthily. Maybe I'll even get a couple of the deck lists if we get lucky, right? And of course, next week is the CCS 10K. That'll be a really big one to report on too. Aside from that, I'm always looking for reports. If you guys are hosting tournaments and you ever want to contact us, definitely just send us an email at theforbiddenmountaintcg@gmail.com. Perfect way to report your tournaments to us, especially if you want to get your players on their meta report. Any information is appreciative. We really do enjoy it. If you like them, guys, hit the like button for me. If you're going to be in Toronto, come give me a high five, shake my hand, give me a hug. You know me, I like warm hugs. Can't wait for this weekend. See the team, enjoy it. It's also, guys, if you see me and my wife, it's my 10-year wedding anniversary. So definitely give her a shout. Say happy anniversary to her. We're very excited to be spending DLC Toronto together and just exploring this game that we both love so much. Thank you guys so much for watching today. I will catch you in the next video.